say that my council is having the only opportunity we're going to have to either say we go with this, we do change some of the federal functions, or that we do not. The United States government's going to keep some of it regardless. They're going to stay the trustee. That element will not change. OST, Office of Special Trustee, has now become the new tribal board. What's their new acronym now? Administrative, yes, financial administration. They even changed their names again. What you all remember as IIM is now Office of Special Trustee. That has changed. Now we go to the new Bureau of Trust Funds Management. We're not looking at that. We're looking at the operational value of how do we get our permitting and drilling rig in. The comment that I think the council has looked at is we have these variables on these options in which we have. We need to decide whether we're going to eat that buffalo in one bite or we're going to go after something smaller. We have a couple of options here. The first one is the total amount. We're projecting it at over $10 million a year. We had a team member work us up for the task force, something a little under that. It comes out to $6 million a year. That's in some of your handouts. My thought on it, and I know it's too much like the Bureau, but if we were to do anything like a TERA, how come we wouldn't do the permitting and the leasing as a council? That we would involve ourselves in that arena that we do now anyway with the help of the Bureau to establish more foundations of our sovereignty. This group that always sues these producers has got a lot at stake here. They have billions at stake. And all they got to do is bust us. And that's their plan. So we're here for a tribal energy resource agreement. We are not going to be told by the federal government what all we're going to give even after the application is sent in. They have 170 days to review it, send it back. I was sitting here saying I have to have a TERA, but I have to look at it before I go on. I'm desperate to get our drilling rigs back. Brother and sisters on the council, we have talked about this, is that I have never been chairman of the Minerals Council without being in federal court. My first week in office with the third council, we were given just a letter that killed us. And that's the BIA backing up and doing the permitting because of these lawsuits. So with the loss of production then, we went from 13,648 barrels immediately down to no drilling. The new drilling is the only way we keep our production up. We are estimating now 10,000 barrels a day. That estimation is probably going to hold now that we actually have a better price. We had to weather two options in which I actually had to weather once as a tribal council. And that's low oil price. Bust, went under $7. My God, this council got to see a minus 38. The big guys stopped sending to the refinery. They got paid. Not speaking out of turn, I sat on 2 White House committees. Believe me, the big companies got covered. One of them even said a force majeure that he wasn't even going to follow his contract to the refinery. So the United States government came to us, asked us that should we look into that? And we came up with a couple of great ideas. Number one, we could have some kind of tank brought here as a unit to hold the oil until the price does get better. There's no sense in giving it away at that unreasonable price because it's not going to help. If we would have held it today, we would have had a 600% increase. Yeah, we would have had a low check, but the check would have caught itself up. Right now, we are looking at, we're 3 months behind. Any production, the headright payment this quarter is going to be $3,550. We finally hit a level area. Folks, it could have been a lot worse. The only thing that worked for us as a tribal council is everyone kept working. Here was the exact opposite. As some of you that have businesses and elements in the field, you know that stopped. This is the first time we were asked by the United States government to allow the oil companies to stop producing your oil and us not terminate the leases. That's for 120 days, and we agreed. But we also had to look at what's next for us. Oil storage is one item. I have a huge gas storage unit down here by Tulsa. ONG didn't want it. So they cut us out of it. They paid us around $280,000 a year for it. So they plugged it out. Don't need it. Our winters were too hot. This last winter, they increased up to so many hundreds of percentages on it. If we would have had that 3.5 trillion cubic feet like we requested, we would have sold it then to the same person who didn't want it. And that's the first reason they plugged it. They knew what I had planned, but the council that's smart enough to know we can take it here and pick it up on the other side. When we are so dilapidated on pricing and the supply and demand, that we have to look at other options of holding it. To get back to today's meeting is what are those options? We're going to go through a few of them. But what I'm really here to ask for is what are you thinking? I've heard enough from the council, believe me. I think this is a great idea. This is grassroots. And I know something else too. You all represent quite a group here. And we're appreciative of that. Last comment I have to make is that we have an exit rate. Even if we do an application in and it's granted and they give us not near enough funding, we can exit out. If we stick with the Bureau, I also get to be the first chairman in history. I plug more wells than we drill. I can't help that. But I can change it. Oil's going up 61. You know what's going to happen? We're going to pull out of these areas and we're going to get caught in a bigger one. The United States has bailout for everyone but you and I. We're going to have to create that ourselves. Everyone here tonight, I want you just to review some of the options that Mr. Trumbley has worked on through our task force. I want to thank Jim for his work, his dedication, and I've got to say this before I sit down. What we need for the Osage Nation is exactly what we're asking for. Your permission, do we step forward? Your permission, do we stay here? The funding is the key, and the Osage Minerals Council will not do one of these unless the funding is secure. And I'm not talking that a future element, since I was one of the few that started gaming, I know how much they got. We're not even looking in those arenas as much as we're looking at what is the federal government going to do for its inherent responsibility and trust responsibility to the Osage Nation. If this doesn't work, we're going to have to do something else. I have my former tribal council with me, national council with me. I have all of you with me. And I've had a council that we have decided we have to know. Do you want us to proceed? No one else should tell my shareholders what we should do. And I'm going to stick with that. So now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Jim Trumbley. If you guys would like to move over here this PowerPoint is option 2. Put the information in your books. And then I don't want you to have to worry about it, thinking all the questions now. Send them to us at Minerals. At OsageNation-NSN.gov. We'll have that available for you. And tonight, after we review this, I want to take some questions from you. And I want to appreciate you being here, because this is what we're going to have. We have one more meeting next Monday in Mahuska, and then we're going to try to do a webinar to allow anyone outside of these districts to come in and have an effort to a response to us. Jim, thank you, sir, as always.
We can give it a second to let everybody come up.
No, I know.
That wants to come up.
Good idea.
Yes. This one working over here?
Really good.
What we're going to do is, if you have any questions, I'm going to hold the question mic so it's raised and all goes to you, and the presenter will have a microphone too.
Thank you, Chairman Waller, for the kind words. Appreciate it. So the first thing what we'd like to do is we're going to go through this presentation, and then some of the council members will come up and speak and give some thoughts they have. But mostly, like Chairman Waller said, we're here to hear from you guys. What do you want to have happen? What are your comments? What are your thoughts? We'd like to, if possible, hold your questions till the end. Let's get through the whole thing. And then raise your hand, and Councilman Talia will come around with the microphone so everybody can hear the question, and then we can directly address it. Okay, so this is the TERA Task Force update. And there's been a lot of discussions about the task force and what it is and what it's not and things like that. The task force was put together in mid-summer, and everybody that was on the Mineral Council was invited to attend. Many members of Congress that were invited to attend, and then our attorney Wilson Pipeston was there, and myself as a project manager, and Paul Yates as a subject matter expert were brought on. Most people attended periodically. They'd come and go sometimes. There were a total of about 7 very active members of the task force. Of those 7 members of the task force, 5 of them contributed and put this presentation together. So, TERA, we looked at several aspects to TERA, and the things we looked at, we wanted to make sure we had the market analysis done, technical analysis, we did a financial analysis, an economic analysis, as well as an environmental analysis. The market analysis, we wanted to make sure if we were to take this on, we had professional people, and so we engaged the Osage Nation HR department to help us with position descriptions, salaries, make sure that we had good, high-quality people. The technical analysis, we evaluated regulatory and statutory requirements to satisfy federal government and oil and gas industry standards. And we looked at other tribes, we looked at other states, we looked at the state of Oklahoma, of course, other regulatory agencies. We also did a financial analysis. Under the TERA, the Osage Mineral Council will be able to streamline the permit approval process. Currently, when somebody has a lease and they come and say, I want a drilling permit, it can take upwards of 250, 270 days And so the question becomes, why would they do that? Because they can walk across the street to Bartlesville and get one inside of a month. So we think we, the Osage people, can streamline the permit approval process, work with the oil and gas producers, get them to come back to Osage County, and we forecasted future revenues as well based upon that, so we had some insight as to what we could do. We also did an economic analysis where we enhanced the permit approval process, kind of piggybacked off some of that stuff we did, increased mineral production, future leaf sales revenues. Everything was done for the benefit of the Osage shareholders, increasing their revenue, and streamlining and improving the transparency so that everyone knows what the production going on inside Osage County. And lastly, we looked at the environmental analysis. Currently, there's a law that if the federal government takes any action, it's called a federal trigger. And I'm sure Mr. Pipestem, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sure he can address it in more direct legal terms, but there's a federal trigger. So if they take an action, the federal government takes an action, then it triggers all these other approvals that have to take place, including the environmental approvals, and the fish and wildlife, endangered species approvals, and all of these other approvals that have to go through, we have to go through these hoops and jump through. We're still going to have to abide by those rules and laws, but we don't have to get them. The federal government will approve us one time, and then we manage it, and we approve them going forward. Did I say that correctly? Okay. So, I'm a project manager. I've been a project manager for about 40 years, and I'm a certified project management professional, and I came on to help us manage this project, because that's exactly what it is. The project is not normal operations. This is definitely out of the norm, and it's got a beginning and ending time. It's a finite period of time, and that's exactly what we're doing. And so we started with the project management, identified the scope, and laid out the project management methodology and guidelines. And then from there, we kind of split a little bit. We had legal work done, which obviously went into Pipestem Law's bailiwick, and they did that. And then we started looking at the BIA, what they were doing, how they were doing it. And by the way, this was an amazing source of frustration. We went to the BIA and asked them, could we see your organization chart and get a listing of what jobs you've got that handle our oil and gas mineral estate? It took over 60 days to get that. We had to ask them over 3 times. Informal letters. We had to threaten to go to the Secretary of the Department of Interior. And then finally we got that. But I mean, that's a sidebar. But anyway, so we got the organization charts, and we started building and identifying things that we needed to have done and needed to have present if we're going to manage our own mineral estates. Well, the regulatory aspect of it, not the whole thing, the regulatory aspect. Once we did that, we came up with this really great organization chart, but it was huge. It was like 45 people. And so that wasn't really realistic at the time to start off with. You know, you don't start an oil and gas company and become ExxonMobil right off the bat, right? You got to start a little bit, and you got to grow it and build it. So we kind of scaled it back a little bit, and we looked at the things that we could do and we couldn't do. And we got a list from the Department of Interior, and we identified things that were contractable functions, things we could take over, and things we could not take over that were inherent federal functions. And we scaled down the organization chart to what you're going to see here in a few slides. Once we did that, then we went through a costing exercise, again, with the Osage Nation HR Department for Labor, because labor cost is by far the largest part of this, but also vehicle costs, facilities, capital equipment, and things like that, and leasing of locations and all that. There costing exercise, and then we said, okay, where's our gap? And that we determined what type of revenue we were looking at needing to get. And then here we're at this the OMC has a no-go decision. And that's where we are right now. And that's what the Mineral Council is doing. They are asking for your input. Do you want to do the go side or do you want to do the no-go side? If you select the go side, then we'll finalize the application, submit it to the Department of Interior, and from that point, the Department of Interior has 270 days to review it and either approve it or make changes or negotiations go on during that whole time period. And that's when we will negotiate the compacting, contracting aspect, the funding aspect, and things like that to see how much money we're going to get, where we're going to get money, and things like that. And like Chairman Waller said, if the money's not there, all you have to do is say, money's not there, no thank you, and walk away. Okay, so we really don't have a lot of rest, to be honest with you. So we have the TERA application, we submit it, and then we go forward with that. So that's the process, and that's where we are right now with it. So what we did was we did a technique called SWOT, which is strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. We took all of the different options that were out there and looked at them. And the first one is if we did a TERA only. In other words, we didn't do compacting, contracting, just a TERA only. And the biggest weakness is that it's the additional funding requirement for the management of the mineral estate. That is going to be a big part of it if we do it this way. They got some strengths. The TERA itself has better overall management over the permitting and as well as internal controls. We have the authority to approve leases, businesses, agreements, and related energy development. We have control over the environmental review, approval, management, and enforcement of leases and related agreements. Some of the opportunities this presents to us, it exerts our tribal sovereignty. We can re-engage with oil and gas producers. The field has changed if we do this, okay? It's a new ballgame. We can increase and expedite business activity. We can return to quarterly lease sales because we control the leasing. We believe that it will in fact increase Osage head right holder payments because we're increasing activity. We're getting new producers coming in. Production is going up. And we can apply innovative technologies like some of the work that Second Chairman Red Eagle and Tali are doing with enhanced oil recovery, CO2 recovery, things like that. And we can look at a lot of things that we're currently constrained on, like helium and other things like that. Some of the weaknesses, there exists presently a negative perception that the Osage Mineral Council and the Osage Nation either can't or won't or don't have distrust and won't work collaboratively. There's a false perception that the Osage TERA would break the trust. Chairman Waller clearly stated a minute ago, it's clearly stated in TERA, we've got legal opinions and documents. The trust relationship stays in place. And like I said, with additional funding required. We also think there's a potential retaliatory action from the BIA DOI, and we think Governor Stitt's relationships with tribes in this one state committee impact could have a negative threat to it. Just because it's a threat doesn't mean we expect it to occur, but it's something we need to keep an eye on and watch. Okay, so that's a TERA only. If we do a compact contract only, in other words, we take some of the funding and do some of the stuff, but we don't really have that, we get better reoccurring annual revenue because that's contracted out. Very much like what we're doing, we're contracting out with the health clinic now, where it used to be the Indian Health Service by itself. Well, now we're compacting and contracting that and we're getting funding for that to manage and run that, like a lot of other tribes are doing too. We still do exercise some tribal sovereignty, although I think it's decreased. We do carry over to following year of funding if not spent. That's an option, that's a benefit of doing this. I don't want to go through all these because most of these, well, a lot of these do carry over to the third option we did a SWOT analysis on, which was doing both. Doing a TERA and compacting contracting. Doing the TERA to get the legal authority to exercise and manage our own leases, do our leases, our drilling permits and applications, workovers and all that stuff, and get the funding that's associated with the compacting contracting. So it gives us better, and you notice there's a lot more strengths and weaknesses when you do it combined. Better overall management of the permitting and internal controls, authority to approve leases, control over environmental review. All of the regulatory aspects now belong and fall under our direction and jurisdiction. We have the recurring annual revenue, we exercise our tribal sovereignty. We have the ability to rebudget, reassign, and reprogram the funds within the mineral estate under the guidance and direction of the Osage Mineral Council. And we get to carry over funds to the following year if the funds are not spent. So some of the opportunities still exist and carry over, like, again, we're exercising and exerting even greater tribal sovereignty, re-engage the oil and gas producers, increase and expedite business activity, have quarterly lease sales, increase shareholders' head right payments. The Osage Mineral Reservation is open for business at this point. And let's be honest, it's been closed for many years. Okay? Opportunity for government-to-government relationships and agreements for services. The thing about this is we have to be, and one of the reasons that all three branches of, well, three of the four branches of government, the Office of the Chief, Congress, and I'm really glad to see some of the Congress people here, the Congress and the Osage Mineral Council have to work together because this is a compacting contracting component. They will only deal government to government, which means they will only negotiate directly with the Office of the Chief. Now, the Mineral Council will have a representative on the negotiation team, of course, but it has to be, government to government discussions. Some of the weaknesses, we still have that perception of a negative perception of collaborative relationships between the Mineral Council and the Osage Nation, and a negative perception of the impact of the inherent federal functions and the fiduciary relationship. In other words, there's still people that are worried that it's going to break the trust. And there is going to take some additional money. Now, I will tell you that there is no way even possible, even if they wanted to and they don't, there's no way that they could take money from the Osage Mineral Estates revenue and fund this. And you'll see why in a minute, because the Mineral Council never gets to touch that money. It goes, the producers will send it to the BIA. It is one of the inherent federal functions that are kept from the BIA or kept by the BIA. So the oil producers will pay the royalties to the BIA. They will divide them and distribute them to the individual shareholders in their, well, I guess we're all used to calling them IIM accounts. Okay? So the big takeaways from doing this combined TERA compact contracting, and I think these are the four big ones right here, is it increases our tribal sovereignty. We control our own destiny. Okay? So the question you got to ask yourself, do you trust your own people, or do you trust the bureaucrats at the Bureau of Indian Affairs? Access and expedited processes. I know we can do things faster, better, more efficient, more effective than the BIA does. Okay? I was a defense contractor for a long time. I know government inefficiencies, okay? I know we can do better. We also have recurring annual funding doing it this way. And I know in my heart of hearts that and nobody on the Mineral Council would be even doing this if that last one isn't true. That we all believe that it's going to increase payments to you, the Osage shareholders. So, how do we go about doing this? So keep in mind that this is a regulatory agency we're talking about. We have two, much like gaming, and I'll compliment Councilperson Gray on this because she came up with the analogy, and it's a spot-on analogy. Like our gaming, we have a regulatory body, and we have our enterprise board. The regulatory body regulates it, monitors, makes sure it's above board, makes sure it follows all the rules and regulations. And the enterprise board generates money. That's what they do. That's what we're looking at here. We're not talking about going out and starting up an oil and gas company where we're going to be producers. Although that's something we definitely want to do in the future, but that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what TERA is about. This is about the regulatory side of the house. Okay? So with that in mind, we came up and took this 45, 46 position board chart that we said, oh man, if we could do everything we wanted, this is what we do. And we said, well, let's start with this and we can grow it as we need to. And so it says right here, subject to change. That's because as soon as you hire that executive director and some of these managers or department heads, they're going to want to staff it the way they see fit. And we should allow that because they're the oil and gas professionals we're looking to hire. Okay, but this is kind of what we're thinking it's going to look like. So we have the executive director, we got subsurface leasing, lease management, enforcement and lease compliance, operations supervisor, or operations department, information technology. We have an oil and gas accounting, oil and gas attorney that's a consultant we hire, put him on retainer. Oh, and let me point this out. At this point, there needs to be an oil and gas attorney, somebody that specializes in oil and gas. One of the complaints I've heard is that the Mineral Council doesn't use people that are not oil and gas attorneys. Well, that's true, but at the same time, oil and gas attorneys don't understand tribal law, Indian law. So we need to have both available to us, and that's what this does right there. And then the last one, and I think this is probably the most exciting thing for me, is the oil and gas accounting auditing department. We're not going to be the ones collecting the revenue, but we do need to be the ones that are making sure that they're paying us for every dime, every drop of oil they pull out of our mineral estate. So we're going to have the ability to audit them and make sure the oil and gas accounting is done correctly and reported to you and paid you based on what reality is, not what they think it might be. So, once we had that, then we looked at our cost estimates, and we broke them up into two main groupings: startup cost, which is basically the first year costing, and then ongoing operational cost. The startup cost is capital expenses and equipment, overhead and admin, and consultants for that, plus the first year's labor cost. And then the operating costs going ongoing will be the ongoing labor costs for rents, vehicles, utilities, cleaning, management, maintenance, things like that. And trying to keep our cost realistic and somewhat constrained, because we wanted to make sure that we had coverage for what we needed, but we weren't extravagant or wasteful. We didn't want to have any waste or fraud. So we had capital expenses and equipment of about $700,000. First year labor expenses based upon Tulsa labor rates and we think will probably be lower once, well, we know it'll be lower once we come back into Pawhuska, or Osage County, I should say. Overhead admin, startup cost, and then consultant startup cost. We come up with about $3.5 million for the first year. The ongoing operational cost, we have the annual labor cost of 2.6, rented facilities of about 100,000, annual maintenance or annual vehicle cost of about 75,000. That will be depreciation and maintenance for the vehicles and things. These vehicles are what the field support staff is going to be using to go out into the field and check the tanks and check the measurements and the kits, the production facilities and things like that to produce it. Cleaning and maintenance and management, about 18,000 in utilities, which would include phone, cell phone, internet, electric, gas, heating, AC, and all that stuff, about 3.5. So the annual operating costs, we think, are going to come in about $3.1 million. So, where did all this come from? This came from you guys. This whole concept of doing TERA, because in the strategic plan update of 2020 and 2025, the first thing you guys said was, one of the first things you said was increased transparency and communication between the Osage Mineral Council and the Osage headright owners. The Osage Nation members consistently requested more communication. That's why we're here tonight. Okay, because we want to make sure we do that. We want to also provide more information and education to Osage Nation members about probates, headrights, and topics like that. And they want to develop an Osage-owned business relating to the oil industry. You remember I said that we had, like the gaming board, this is putting the regulatory organization in place. Then we can look at doing, like so many of our other friends and other brothers and sisters, like the Southern Utes. They've done an amazing job over the past 20, 30 years, something like that. They've been doing oil and gas for quite a while. But they built their own business. And that's the second side of the house. So, where's the money going to come from? Well, we've identified Department of Interior and DEMD grants of about $1.5 million. We think there's probably going to be a need for some tribal funding of about 1.2. We think we could, through compacting contracting, we think we can get about 1.9 million. And then other revenues, including, we took into account some of the revenues that we might get for application fees and things like that as well. Because when they come and apply for a drilling permit or a workover permit, they're going to pay a fee for that. So those are some of the fees. And then there's some other opportunities for that as well, including some things like the enhanced oil recovery, the orphan well got some grants and things like that. So there's other revenues there that we can get as well. Okay, so these next two slides I think are probably the most important and the biggest takeaway I want you guys to listen to. What is TERA? Well, they have a list of things that we can take over that they said, if you want these, we'll let you take them over. But there's these other things that we can't take over, and we're going to cover those in just a second. But we can take over pre-leasing, things we do in advance of signing a lease. We can take over the leasing aspect. We can do lease sales. We can negotiate the leases. We can acquire bonds. Environmental and cultural resource review. That is probably about the only thing the Osage Nation is going to do. And of course, why would they currently do that with Department of Natural Resources, DNR, and Dr. Hunter's group and things like that. So why would we want to replicate something that's already in place and they're doing a really good job? So we would probably contract with them.
That's correct.
To do that one thing. Okay? And then records management for the leasing parts. We would also look at lease approvals. the utilization, leasing, overriding royalties, contracts, termination, royalties in kind, notice administrative appeals, and records management. On permitting and operations, we would handle all the processing of the applications for drilling, workover, and plugging permits, commercial and non-commercial easements, operations itself, the production, the collecting, records management, notice and administrative appeals. We would also do lease compliance and enforcement, inspection and investigation, theft of production, fire accidents, emergencies, shut-in actions, production oversight, production verification. That's something we don't have insight into right now. You know, we're told, oh, they produce so many barrels of oil out of this rig. We have no idea. We're just taking it on good faith right now. We would take over avoidable loss and waste of production, and of course, records management, notice, and appeals. What is not in the TERA is the ARPA permitting, Archaeological Resource Protection Act. We have to get approval initially with the federal government for that. That's an inherent federal function. As well as compliance, we have to make sure we are in compliance with the Endangered Species Act. We also, and this is a huge one, they are taking they keep the collection and accounting for revenue and all for the Osage mineral estate. They keep all of that. We don't touch the money on the back end. Settlement with service damages. They take care of the Osage headright payments. They take care of the production direct gas payments. They take care of the Osage tribal operating expense payments. All of this they currently do. Operations on restricted Indian lands, issuance of orders of maintenance. They handle all the Freedom of Information Act, the FOIA, records management. We have a point of contention. You notice there was records management on all of the other functions we're taking over that was contractible. They identified as contractible. They identified those hand record management components. We have to have access to the records. Not only the current records, but the historical records. When I was 11 years old when I drew my first geological sample off an oil and gas rig. My dad was a geologist. I've been a geological assistant, I've been a geological draftsman, I've been a petroleum landman. If you don't have the records, you don't have drilling. Because if they don't have any insight into what was drilled nearby, they're not going to take the chance. So we have to have access to the record. All of the contractible functions, each one of them had record management listed. So, information collection and appeals. What is it also excluded? All inherently federal functions, which are these. And notice all aspects of revenue collection and distribution. Relinquishment of the trust relationship or obligation of the U.S. federal government with regards to the Osage mineral estate remains as it is. Okay? The trust is not broken. It's not impacted in any way. Okay, so that's the presentation. We followed we followed to the letter things like the...
Do we have time for questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just want to make sure we've
Yep.
covered a lot of material.
I know.
Someone asked, is there anyone with a question?
Yes, Mr. Alvaro.
Well, when I was looking at your organizational chart, all of those that you would hire, they would be employees of the nation?
Okay, so let me go back to that slide.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how the whole reporting thing was there.
Okay, so much like the gaming, people that work in the casinos, they are still employees of the nation. but they don't report to the nation. They report to the gaming board. Well, they report to the casino structure.
You know, people that work for the gaming commission, they are employees of the Osage Nation.
Right.
But not the enterprise.
But,
The
yeah.
casinos are employees of the enterprise.
So this regulatory body would report to the mineral council. Now, they may very well be, mineral council would be the only entity that would have oversight of this group, of this regulatory agency. I think Wilson can probably clarify this up. I'm probably not doing a really good job.
Well, I think this whole group of employees. Oh,
Got a question back here.
Yeah, finish this one, answer this, okay? This whole group of employees would answer to the Osage Minerals Council, right? They would answer to the Minerals Council. This would be a regulatory body created by and answering to the Osage Minerals Council.
The ones that would do the hiring and the firing and.
Yeah, they would above the executive director would be the Osage Minerals Council. Now, the best practices there is usually the Minerals Council would hire and fire an executive director, but then sort of let them run the day-to-day, right?
I do have one issue to add to that. You were told in there that if we go to the nation under their programs, we will be going into the DNR division, we will be going into Tribal Historic Division, and this funding will also be to expand their help for us. But those will be staying as nation employees. We will just be paying a contract. These will be ours. Any question back here?
Yes, I was just going to ask, I know that Everett said earlier that there would be an exit ramp if we did take this route, and I was wondering what type of effects would we have based on that, or backlash, or what that may cost us as a group regarding that?
I think it's a great question about the off-ramps. So basically, there's an off-ramp everywhere, right? So there's not a certain point where you have to say, okay, we have to make a judgment now. You know, the Minerals Council could decide this is enough, we're not going to do it now. You could get to the point where the tribe, the Minerals Council, and the nation submit the application, and you're at day 269 in the federal approval, and they're about to approve it. You can say, we've decided we're not going to do it. The other thing is, even after there's approval, and say the Minerals Council starts operating, they create this entity, and it's operating, and the Minerals Council decides this is not working like we thought it was going to. They can decide to stop and turn it back over to BIA. Now also, if the Minerals Council creates all of this and does the things that are under the TERA and really screws it up, for some reason, the Bureau of Indian Affairs has an obligation to take it back over. Just like it does with a 638 contract, like a clinic, or there's still that authority because this trust responsibility remains. So if you go back, Jim, to that list of what is a TERA, what is not. Okay, let's go to the what is not. This is the long list of duties that cannot be in a TERA. It cannot be there because the Department of the Interior has said these are inherently federal functions. That is not something that could be included. Well, there's a lot of stuff there, right? Now, part of that is the idea that it's inherently federal suggests that because we have a trust obligation to you, we can't turn that over. So the trust responsibility is still there. So these parts, they say you don't even have a choice. The list before, on what is here, the pre-leasing, leasing, lease approvals, which by the way should not look very scary based on what we do today. This next part, the permitting and operations, the application for drilling, I'm telling you, that's what kills the industry in the Osage. It takes so long right now. the Bureau of Indian Affairs to do the APDs, that the hope is that with the Osage Nation and the Osage Minerals Council doing this, particularly, as Jim pointed out, these environmental reviews, that it will become a more efficient process, because you do not need a federal approval for every lease, every action. So if it's working right, that is the big advantage of the TERA. Yeah, 45 days for approval rather than twice as long.
Go right ahead, sir.
We need to go with the dance, I want to hear from the crowd.
Yes.
So let's say we do the TERA. How long would it take to get your people in place? And how soon would we be starting? Would we parallel with the EIA, or are we looking just to jump right into it and take full control?
Well, the actual logistics, the way it'll work is once we finalize the application and submit it, and the federal government starts evaluating and approving it, we'll immediately start working towards laying the groundwork for the organization. We would like to get the organization, you know, if they approve it on 270, 271, we're ready to go. Are we going to get there? Yeah, we'll just have to see what roadblocks happen. That would be the plan. You have another question back here?
Constitutionally, how does this regulatory body get placed under the mineral space?
I'm going to turn it over to the lawyer for that one.
Easy. We applied for it. We're already doing the MICA with the nation now, under other 638 contracts. We're not introducing anything new except for the evaluation of protecting our reservation. And that's how we're going to take care of that. When we actually was on the tribal, this question came up when the new government shows up. We know it was coming. At that point, you look at exactly what I'm getting ready to say. I am selected by Osage shareholders. I am trying to give something to that girl in the back that I received. I understand the commitment. I come off of the National Council. Ask us how much money we had. Ask us how long did we last. Well, I'm on the other group now. As a tribal and now the minerals. I think the brother asked a great question. The effect of a TERA has to be immediate. We have to fill in that under HR. And the other thing is we're going to reach out and have that process done, as you're an expert in that field. And you know that. But what Mr. Wyghorn's asking is the other thing. August 15, 2015, I won a federal lawsuit as chairman of the Osage Minerals Council that said 1906 is forever until we don't want it anymore. It says no federal law, no federal act can impose itself on us. No one. And I just do not feel like going to that fight again because I don't have to. The Supreme Court is the final answer here. And that's going to be what my answer is to this. We have to know if we're going to go. Yes, I understand the pricing, but this new government has spent $500 million. Ask me how much they paid on my court cases for 8 years. Ask me when they showed up when I started. Who stopped the Bureau? I'm in a case against them now. I'm down to a deposition to win it all. Thank you.
Another question.
Go ahead, dear.
If the nation takes over as TERA and has all this, or the Minerals Council has this, well, the owners have to have the fiduciary responsibility for the mineral estate, is that correct?
No, the fiduciary responsibility will still be with the United States as trustee.
So the language in CFR 2440 Part D, the United States is not liable for losses to any party, including any tribe, for any negotiated term of a lease, business agreement, or right-of-way the tribe executes under a TERA.
Right, exactly, yes.
So to me, that reads that they're not responsible for anything that happens. That any document that we execute as a tribe under TERA, they're not responsible for any loss that may occur. Fiduciary responsibility 10 or 15, 20 years down the road, because we've signed the leases and we've approved it, and we've taken them out of that picture as far as it goes. And I understand at the top part it says they do have to keep the trust responsibility, but they're going to keep what they're going to do is keep the trust asset together. But if you read Part D, they're not responsible for any actions that happen to our leases or our production after that. Part D.
I'm sorry. The key word is the negotiated part, right? So in other words, say we enter into an agreement with an oil company, and that we say, okay, we'll take 15%. Then all of a sudden they hit big, and we say, gosh, we should have gotten 20. What that means is we cannot sue the BIA for our bad negotiation, right? Now see if you can do that now under our existing law with the existing trust, see if that would work. I think the answer to that is no. Right now, because we have a BIA-driven form lease, whatever we decide there, there is no ability, okay, so don't lose track of this. There is a trust responsibility between the Osage Nation and the United States. There's a separate one between head right holders and the United States. Now, the difference is, when can you enforce the trust responsibility? When the government does something, when can you sue them and enforce against that? That's not everything. So right now, if we negotiate a lease and we don't do a very good job, and the Minerals Council says later, I wish we would have got more money for that. How do you think that's going to go? Do you think we can sue the BIA for that negotiation at this point? That does not diminish the trust to be able to not enforce that part of it, in my view. Now, is that a fair thing? Is that a difference? I think it is. It is something I think that we all have to recognize, that if there's something, and keep in mind that TERA says specifically, it's negotiated. So what does that mean? Some amount of land or some price. If it means we sit across the table. We decide, we enter into an agreement. We can't say, well, we made a bad negotiation. We're going to sue the BIA for a bad negotiation. We cannot do it. Now, can we do that now? What do you think? We enter into a bad deal. That is not something I think the courts have said you can bring an action and enforce against the United States on that anyway. Okay, I can tell you that when we sued the United States, Councilman Whitemore was on the trust team on that, where most of that money in that case was where the Bureau of Indian Affairs did not collect monies owed to the head right holders from oil companies. And then they underinvested it. Right, so it wasn't at the lease point of the negotiation. But I do think it's fair to point that out. What Tony Whitemore is saying is that is a change. It is a change. So we need to understand that is something. If we sit across the table, we enter into a negotiation with an oil company and say, and later wish, well, we made a bad move. We can't sue the BIA for those dollars. But I don't know that you could sustain that action against the United States right now.
So how will this body be moving under the Minerals Council?
So right now, of course, you got a three-part government. You got the chiefs, the Congress, and the judiciary. Then you have an independent agency that is the successor to the 1906 Act Tribal Council. Right? The Constitution creates that body, calls it the Minerals Council, and says it's an independent body with certain authorities, including management and administration. So under that rubric, or under those words of the Constitution, I think is this, right? Because look, we're already doing leasing. Does the Minerals Council do leasing now? Anybody know? Of course we do. Of course the Minerals Council does that. Right? So some of these things should look very familiar. This permitting, though, that is where it takes so long to get a permit to drill. that, anyway, that's where part of the promise is, that's the Bureau of Indian Affairs doing it now. And it's taking so long that people don't even want to come do business here anymore.
Yeah, we want to encourage continued questions. That's why we're here, and we appreciate each and every feedback, because it's going to help us, we hope, make better decisions. So I'll run the microphone over to you. Thank you, Mr. Whitehorn, for that series of questions. Here's the next round.
Okay, I would like to know on this organizational chart, you said the top would be the Minerals Council, then we had the executive director, and then we all space out to all these 24 staffing levels. So we would be hiring 24 new people, is that correct?
Yes.
And so how would the executive director be determined? Who picks that?
The Minerals Council.
We use the Osage Nation HR process at this time to hire our employees.
So these 24 would be hired through them?
If I'm sitting there, yes.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm trying to ask. Okay, so, but then you all would appoint an executive director, is that correct?
Yes.
And you all would, and then you all would appoint the executive assistant and the admin support assistant? So you would be appointing 3 key
It would still
positions?
be vetted through the HR division that they are, once they are vetted through it, then they bring the process of hire.
I understand that, so you all will pick them, then they have to go through a vetting process, is that correct?
They will have to apply for it to be part of the process to be allowed in on this position.
Okay, all right, well, and so tell me once again, Wilson, how our trust cannot be broken.
So on the face of the new TERA law, it says that this does not diminish the trust between an Indian tribe and the United States. The statute itself giving a tribe this authority, the United States, it says that. Now, Mr. Whitehorn pointed out is the one area you've really got to stay focused on.
So, and that is a big risk, correct?
I don't think it's really a big risk, because it does expressly say if you negotiate a bad deal, you can't say, okay, me and Brother Everett are in a negotiation, and he gets the best of me on that deal. I come over here to be, I'm suing you, BI, for letting me do that. You should have not let me cut that deal. Right now, under the 1906 Act and under existing laws, we enter that same negotiation today, and I feel like we got the best of it. Yeah, I can try to sue the Bureau of Indian Affairs for my bad decision, but there's no authority under the law to effectively sue the government for that Indian.
What if the third party issues the federal government doesn't have the back? And I didn't see very many professional fees weighed in. And I realize right now that we're having problems with professional fees in this body. So what happens when that third party sues the Minerals Council?
There's no difference than today on that. Except if I'm the Minerals Council, I have sovereign immunity, right? That does not change. Unless I negotiate a deal that waives that immunity.
And
The Osage Nation Supreme Court.
Yeah. How is that different? Why do you think that's different?
well, let me give you an example of what I'm
Okay.
looking at, and I'm really truly seeking an answer
Okay,
on
good.
this. So, say that we were under a TERA during the time that Mr. Drummond filed the NEPA case, which shut us down.
Okay.
And we were the ones that were administrating the trust, and we were operating under that old environmental impact statement,
Which we're not.
which we're not right now, but this is just an example. Who would have the responsibility of that lawsuit and protecting our assets from suit if we would have made that decision, if that third party would have sued us under a TERA? Where would we be right now with that? The federal government's not going to have our back because we were the ones that did the action.
It's
That's
according to
how I
what
view
they're
it.
suing us over.
Pardon me?
It's, a lot of it's according to what are we getting sued
Of course,
on?
that's the whole
But-
question for me, right there.
But I
Look at
want,
that. I mean, that's a whole
Right.
question.
I'm gonna, Mr. Potts,
It's a new road. It's a new road.
the last time I heard this was with the well plugging. We took over well plug. And we went to the same issues. We're doing the decisions and we were told torque still is in effect, even though we're running the plug. We've now plugged 32 wells. We've identified 11. I hope that kind of helps answer. We were in question too, because we're calling all the shots and plugging, and they went to the higher ups, and they said, no, you're still under the trust protection. And they'll have to come in if we do a problem with plugging.
And that would be in the negotiation part of the TERA. That will be put in there, especially when they start going commitment to other than Title 25 actions of the CFR code. When you try to use another code that's over 574 tribes, everything's going to look weak. But I've represented this nation so long under 4 different governments that I can tell you now is you have very few options. This is one of them we have to review. The next question was asked is that if a third party sues us over this terror element, that is a good question. But the other part is your sovereign immunity important to our nation and our Congress? It must be, they're here. And that's where we're going to have to join together. I can't fight this with even the counsel I have. We are having to prepare for a deposition against a foreign entity. The federal government did not file the appeal. The Osage Third Minerals Council did, or we wouldn't even be having this talk, because you're right. If they beat us, you all are right, everyone, because we're the first one that anyone can do gaming. I started it, I know that. Secondly, this oil reserve, though, is going to be looked at who owns the land. They can't take your gaming. They can't take your enterprises, your LLCs, but they can take your estate. And you know who's after it. Last item, and I would still like the questions because we've got to field these now.
Right, that's a good,
And these aren't nothing we haven't heard before.
got another question after this here.
Yes, go right ahead.
okay, on the organizational chart, I see over here on the far right, oil and gas accounting auditor, oil accountant, gas accountant, audit administration assistant. Are you telling us that if we do this, that we will be able, we can't audit the BIA? So what does, who is this person gonna audit?
I need to answer something. The BIA has just now brought the NIOGM's accounting program to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and we just established it in the Osage Nation IT department. They have been working under TAMS. What is, this is going
How
to
do you
be
spell
covered.
that? Excuse me, how do you spell that? NIOGMs.
The NIEGNS. It's an acronym for the new process that they're going to use to replace the tribal administrative element of TAMS, minerals and mining system. Everything's outdated. If you have realized this council's had to do something else, and I think everybody should be relatively aware of it. Sometimes we have to even fight them to get the check in on time. This other element, and something that we're missing here, is I filed a lawsuit 20 years ago against this exact comment. That answer, I had it when I was on the tribal council. You sue them. And just to finish on that one request, it was over exactly that. You asked about this new system. We're going to go for a digitalization. We are looking at a data platform, and the information that we have under production, I'll be honest with you, if it looks good, we ought to keep it as an Osage.
You know, if I may, just a second here.
Councilman.
The accounting will, the auditing is going on with our process here, that's here. The auditing and checks that the BIA does will remain. Now, just remember that Wilson covered it, so did Mr. Trump, or Dr. Trumley. All the money handling stuff stays with the Bureau. We're only handling leasing. So just remember that. We're not taking, and he's got that whole list that we asked them, they did the lawyer work, and they paid for it, and said, this is the stuff you cannot take. And I just put it in, that's the money handling part, to pay our head right holders their money, collecting all those things stay with the feds. We're only basically talking leasing steps to get to a lease. Or, I'm really asking these guys, we want a business agreement. I think you don't get, leasing's fine, but we need to explore business agreements.
Yes, sir.
And that's kind of inherent in this TERA process, right?
Okay, back to this chart. You say that you all will appoint an executive director and these other two positions. I noticed that all the mineral councils is not here tonight. Are the other members, are they on board with this, Tara, or is there any?
They are on board of us reaching out to you and finding out what you think our best directive is.
Okay.
Two of them are off on, asked that they have a COVID element, and the other one's on travel status and called in.
Okay, so if that's the case, why, okay, you know, a lot of talk goes around about what y'all are doing up there. And I have been told, I don't know this for sure, that Marcia brings an attorney to every meeting because no one can get along. Is that true? Are we paying for her attorney?
Ma'am, we do not make any elements of that nature over a TERA comment. The answer is no.
Well, okay, but I don't see how, okay, I guess I'll put it like this. I don't see how you all can do an executive director if you can't have a meeting without arguing over who touched who or who said what. I mean,
that's a personal issue that
well, I know, but it will affect it affects us if you all can't. I mean, I was told that it's pretty much after the prayer and you have a few little things that are said, everyone goes into executive every meeting, and so the people in the audience don't even know what's going on. That's why I quit going to, you know, I'm not trying to be, I'm just like, you know, if you all can't get along in a meeting, how are we going to do this whole thing?
That's a great question. Sitting there on my 7th year, I will tell you this, is that I do understand the plight. These are the folks that were elected. This is not a corporation. I can't choose my people that I'm elected with. I'm just doing the best I can. When you sit in a term as long as I have, you're going to have to give a little bit on the side of that. I wish it was better. But you are bringing up specifics on specific people, and I won't answer that. This is not the place or time, and I'd like to ask this young lady to go ahead and continue, if that's the end of your question.
That's it.
Thank you.
Well, my question is, exactly like that with every election, we get new board members. And we get new ideas. How do we know for sure the executive director will not be a friend of some council member who wants to chunk the whole thing after we get into it? What guarantee is there that it won't be nepotism or something like that?
You actually answered your own question, because under the HR division of the Osage Nation, that is the element that are used. Exactly that. Once that vetting is done, that is to give you a better transparency issue on that question. They handle that. If they feel like it's a problem, then they won't be brought to us as far as an employee and the other issue you have. We have not had that problem, but the question could be asked all across the nation. I'm held to a smaller unit. Also, I didn't have 23 million to operate on. I only have what we have given by the shareholders on 5%. We pay the state of Oklahoma more than that. With that being said, now, they are vetted by the HR division. It has that element in it. It has it over exactly what you're bringing up. Also, if we handle these contracts, I am the former transportation director for the nation. Brother here handles more contracts than ever dreamed of. We make sure that that is covered by the federal laws and regulations of the hiring practice of the Osage Nation. And I'm chairman, I promise you that's what I will do.
Real quickly, in addition to all of that, there would be rules and regulations and procedures and processes in place that are designed to prevent that exact same thing from happening. So in addition to all of that, there would also be rules and regulations, hiring regulations.
Okay, I have two questions, if I may. The first one is, I noticed that you mentioned potential retaliation by the BIA or the DOI. And we know in the past, they can be a bit vindictive, but so what exactly are you really worried about? Is it the things that are listed that is not on the TERA that they have control over? What exactly?
I'd like to answer that. That was a question from the gallery. We ourselves, we have to look at these. It's time to forget what the BIA is going to do, because I can tell you, they haven't fixed nothing that's broke yet. And with that, we have to move on. We've got to move on in that area.
What are they?
No, go ahead, sir.
What are they? I think our attorney covered it. I'm a little slow in hearing, I guess. What's the BIA gaining out of this?
They are going to gain very little, except they're going to keep their inherent federal functions, keep their payroll going.
Okay, do we keep the division order department?
Yes.
Do we keep the division order?
We will have, if we go for the leasing, like I was looking at and the permitting, the answer is yes. But here's the other thing, before we get way off track here, no matter what we do on the leasing, it's going to have 1906 on the front end as a driver and locomotion. That and our
Listing all historical listing.
everything. If we sell helium, we sell hydrogen, that's going to be at a 3-year term at 20 to 25%. To get reelected, I'll probably say 25.
You should be really. I'm kidding. That's what producers.
Okay, now that's a wait. He is right. No, as a producer, he is right. You cannot put so much of a burden over the taxation on our producer. Not only do they have a problem there, they can't even get the permits to go into a well that K County will be done in 2 weeks through the Corporation Commission. His dollar cents are so long that he knows, man, I wish I could have drilled that at 20 bucks, 30 bucks a barrel. Now I'm paying 60 bucks a barrel pricing for that rig, if he can get it. And in all seriousness, I probably raised it more than anyone while in this capacity. I think you'll be safe to go with 20% for 3-year term.
So the accounting division order will go with us. If we go with this route.
And that will not change the division order that you're speaking of. We are just taking the paper and documentation. That document is what you're paying the Osage shareholder by, and the federal government's not going to change that. they're going to keep all of these positions from Washington all the way down just for that.
Okay, for example, in Osage County, seems like most of the leases when we deal with landowners, have no idea what's going on, the rules and regulations in Osage County. Is there any way we could work with the state or someone, realtors have to divulge information that it is all minerals owned by the Osage Nation?
Yes.
And then, do we have rules that we would uphold to as far as distance, people could build houses, set fences, the right to egress and ingress?
Yes, sir. That would be taken into consideration.
Certainly don't adhere to it now.
They need to read their abstract. The abstract's first paragraph states that the Osage Nation is allowed to go after our mineral reserves of any type, oil, gas, the other. On the producer side of it, we're not going to be changing any of that. The only thing we're trying to do is expedite your permitting. So you're not going to see nothing new.
If you decide, and everybody agrees that we change this, our field representatives, they go out, what kind of authority are they going to have to say, you must stay 125 feet away from this well when you build your house? What we want to do, will you be able to say, we will uphold that like we used to?
That's a really good question. My thought, and I've asked Mr. Pipestein and Jim early on, is that we just do leasing, we keep fields open. That was my thought. Because we got a lot of Osages in the field, working in the field, and we keep that aspect over. However, in the whole big plan, they just brought everything over and stopped it once that lease is approved, man. Does that make sense to you? And then you're monitoring the lease. So, but I want to stop it up here before the field guys take it over. And then, so those things are on the table.
It's all in, it should be black and white.
It will be under negotiation of the Enforcement Act, which you have to follow, and that will help apply.
I think he's saying something. You're saying that you're saying we need to do a better job than telling you how we're going to do this.
I'm saying when I have a problem with somebody building a home 60 feet from the well, which doesn't even make sense. They do it because the realtor is selling a piece of property. He
Right.
don't care if he wants to sell it, move on and build another home.
Okay.
But I'm stuck with, it's like somebody building a house at an airport, complaining about the house flying.
Yeah, those are the problems we have now, and then when we pull it over, if we do, it'll still be there. We have those same issues. So, I mean,
We have laws that says you have to stay. So
well, we're talking, just a second. We're talking among ourselves, and we have differences in opinions. I think we need to shift this over to the nation and let us write laws in Congress and put the feds to sleep, because every time they start picking up the pen, we suffer as Osages. So I think we ought to utilize our nation and our laws. We got 2 Congress people right here. It's a pretty good joke over there. I want to hear about it. But I've got the confidence we'll do a better job letting these guys write our laws, what we need in the field, so we can enforce it.
may I ask what was the cost? Is that in here, the cost of the
They're getting paid now. We haven't been given, that's free information out of a green book given to the nation. I can do estimates, it's under former employee, probably 3 million to given another, 2 million operating.
Yeah, 1.9
Yes, sir.
is what we think.
That's all we have.
But they won't tell us right now. Going back to your point about enforcing leases, that's really what this department, a big part of what this department is enforcement and lease compliance.
Yes, sir, but he's asking the law that protects him in that environment, and we would go to the Osage Nation Congress for that.
Absolutely correct.
Another thing is there is an operator now that's having with breeding problems.
Sir, I am aware of that.
Developing coming in. It's big.
Got a question over here.
Yes.
Got a
Yes,
question in the back?
Yes.
Okay, my bad.
How much is this gonna cost to get into this TERA? Can we back out of this TERA? And if we do back out, are the funds refundable or not?
So the question was, what's it gonna cost? And if we
Yeah,
back
what's the
out,
cost gonna be?
if we back out, what happens to those funds?
Yes.
Okay, so we project the first year, the funds are gonna cost about 3.5 million. That are, I mean, that's gonna be the total cost of managing this. And we think we'll get, and this is all subject to negotiation, once we enter and start negotiating with the Department of Interior and other DOI and DEME. But we think there's about 1.5 from the DOI and probably, or 1.9 from DOI and 1.5 I believe as well. If we back out, I'm assuming, and Mr. Patterson can verify, that if we back out, then we will no longer receive those funds. We wouldn't have to give back what we've already expended, but going forward, we wouldn't get any more.
Now, are you including this price you got on these sheets, is that the inflated price or just price?
That's a great question over the brother bills every day. Lumber alone is raised 400%.
Yeah, I mean, everything is.
No, ma'am, I think these are conservative.
So,
Oh, where did we get the figures? Is that what you're asking?
Just asking if they include the inflation that's really hit our economy in the last, what,
3 months.
3
Well,
months?
what I did was I took the estimates using market studies for labor rates for those positions, and then I added 20% kicker on top of that to cover any extra additional cost. Plus, we had added the labor or the benefit rates on top of that before we did the 20% kicker.
We get all the records.
That will be a huge part of the negotiation. We have to have all the records. I mean, the entire task force, the middle council is united in that.
Okay, Mr. Pipestein said that their negotiations have to be government to government. So that means with the chief.
Correct.
Okay, so will he, first of all, where does he stand on all this? And will he defer and respect the decisions made? Sorry, Ben.
I know,
That-
pretty powerful, keep talking.
I'm just curious where he stands and, will he respect or defer to the decisions that you all make? I'm just not sure how all this is going to.
That's a good question.
They have opportunities which the nation is always allowed to go after an application for a TERA status. He might have other possibilities here. The other situation comes is that, like I said, we're already in some contracts with the nation that's held under a multi-year funding agreement, which will take care of that.
can I add to that? See that picture up there? That picture up there represents Osage Congress, the Minerals Council, and us as chiefs. We were all together when we decided to do the pre-application. We discussed it. He had to sign off on it to get into the pre-application. So, as we move forward, we continue to work with Congress and Office of the Chief, but because he is the chief, he is the one that sets up that negotiation team. But there's 3 members of Minerals Council that is on that.
So you're not concerned at all?
or I wouldn't be
That's-
here.
Okay, okay.
I just know if the money's not there, we're out.
Yeah, that's a really good question. A little example I would give you is the plugging team. We have a plugging team now. They're either Osage or they're married to an Osage. And the head guy of it is also an Osage tribal member. So I think we got more Osages than probably, well, I'm not gonna say, maybe the casinos but the chief, the executive oversees it, but we handle all the daily business. So that's kind of an example, a small example of how this thing's gonna work. The chief is gonna, and the office will negotiate. You're right, you are correct. And then we're hoping Mr. Pipestem's right, we're here, and the executive's right under us, and it's gonna roll in that fashion. That's our hope. Is that correct, Tim?
The multi-year funding agreement guarantees it. I signed with the chief of the nation on behalf of the council to have this effort in the money that I received from the United States government to plug these wells that are abandoned. We're going to use the same process, we just expanded more. While we're on the subject, this council is looking at another 10 billion additional funds for just plugging. The process we go through for it is going to be exactly the process we're going to go through with this. The funds will always have a transparency between our nation, our council, and the people we represent. Now, I'm going to close with this, the people we represent. I understand a lot of complaints and a lot of federal triggers, but I need to hear from shareholders. I'm getting ready to really expend some time here and try to look at the last comment. The last comment is we have no options but to look at this. If our oil had stayed up, if I was doing 600 permits a year, we wouldn't be here. If oil had stayed up, like when I worked for them at 80, we wouldn't be here. But I'm the first man to sue the United States government. Probably won't be the last.
Question?
Yes.
I think I'm echoing the same thing that she had asked. So there's nothing truthfully, other than the picture up there, that guarantees the executive could not take this and do it themselves. Where I think it should be under the Minerals Council, I do believe that, but there's nothing that would keep them from keeping it under the nation executive. Is that correct?
I'm not going on record.
I understand that,
but you and I have sat on councils.
yes.
Okay, gotta do better.
Oh,
So we gotta do better. No, so I think the answer to that is the chief does not have authority over minerals under the Constitution.
He does not,
He
you're
does
right.
not have authority. So
Absolutely.
if the chief says, I'm doing a TERA on my own, he can't do it when it comes to minerals. He can do it over, if you want, he can still do a TERA if you want to do wind and solar.
But who got the TERA amended? Did the Minerals Council get the TERA
the
Act
United
amended?
States did.
Wait, I don't.
No.
What's your question? I don't understand your question.
Who went and had the amendments in 2015 up in the United States Congress? Who stirred that up, got it put in front of committees and had it amended?
A lot of different tribes. A lot of different tribes. Did you think the Osages did that by, with the chief did it by himself?
I think that we were up there pretty big.
Okay.
Without this Minerals
That's a
Council.
lot of influence.
Thank you. I needed that clarification.
Yes, sir. 2015, David Mullen was up there before Congress. I have documents to show
He was on
you.
the committee. He worked for the committee.
And he was working for the nation, for Jeffrey Standing Bear, at the same time. Without the Minerals Council approval. Yes, sir, I have the document.
Okay, right.
He was being paid by the nation.
When he was working for the Senate. too.
I can't answer neither.
And he wasn't
one.
working for the Senate in
So I'd like to go
2015.
ahead and continue with my.
He was our lobbyist, he was Jeffrey Standing Bear's lobbyist for the nation. So that happened then, but I do have questions about cost, because that's what it all comes down to, is can we afford to do this? Because we have so many things in the nation that we need to do for our people. Shareholders are very important. This mineral
They're going to really
estate,
be if we're not getting.
This
some
mineral
water.
estate is very important, but, you know, I'm looking at your numbers here, and you're saying 1.2 in tribal funding, which would be gaming dollars. I talked to somebody up at the DEMD today, and they don't
Argue
know.
that?
No, on
Thank you.
my curiosity, no, I did not represent myself as anybody except myself. And that I was going to a meeting and I was curious about these funding dollars that I'm seeing here. And I asked them, is there funding? They aren't aware of any funding, grant funding. Are you guys aware, is there definitely some grant funding there?
I'm not going for grant funding.
Well, that's what this is. It says DOI and
That is how it's
DEMD
delivered to your nation.
grants.
You were in office, that's how we deliver some of our funding there. You took some instruments from the Minerals Council and tribal, and you enveloped them into your nation. Our water at the industrial park, our villages, the rest of the elements.
Now, I'm still just looking at what your presentation says. It says 1.5 million.
It's our presentation.
Right. I'm looking at the presentation here, and it says $1.5 million of grant funding from the DOI and DEMD grants.
Right, we do receive funds from them already, in grants.
Right,
Currently, we do.
right.
Currently, we do.
I was asking for this TERA, potential funding for the TERA,
Yeah.
and they said that,
We continue to, every year we go after new grants.
I just
Right
want to
now,
know who
they're-
you talk to, is
Yeah,
telling a
because
constituent of
there's-
mine that there is no funding available.
they
Just
weren't
back
aware of
when
any
the
TERA,
public-
they weren't aware of any TERA funding that was set
Well,
aside
that's
for
not,
TERA.
it's not under them anyway. TERA funding is not under DMD.
I think it's a valid question.
Yeah.
She's questioning how are you getting these figures together? It's a good question.
It is a good question, because if the grant funds don't come through, that's gonna increase the tribal funds if you guys do this.
That's exactly
You know,
right.
And what, I just have to say one more thing.
Sure.
Because you guys just went and asked, and the Congress gave you money. But the chief of the Osage Nation pocket vetoed that money.
Yeah.
He pocket vetoed it, and he said right here in his little letter that the Congress, the treasurer, and the principal chief have a duty of oversight, which would include review of your vendor contracts, your billing invoices, and your reports.
Yes.
Yep.
So are you an independent agency or not? Who's gonna be running this show? That's my concern. If he can withhold this money from you, you guys can get into this mess right here, and he can withhold that funding from you then. That's all I'm saying.
Just like and that's a great question.
That's a good point.
It is a very good point.
And I'm just, and it's happened.
Exactly.
You know, you're right, you're reading it, I'm sure it's public, right? Yeah, so, and we're dealing with it, we're communicating among ourselves. And it's brought up some good questions and comments along all these lines you're hitting right on. But I'm saying, I think with the structure of the well plugging and our duties to get those plugged, and we've had a lot of comments and communications with the BIA, I'm hoping that this thing's gonna roll just like that, and they don't interfere just when we start asking for money. That's when we have to get their approval. We put it into their,
I hope it's not a very good business plan.
I understand. I'm not, maybe a poor choice of words, but I'm seeing it in action with the well plugging. Even though they won't negotiate with us as a government. They're gonna negotiate with the nation. And that's how this TERA is gonna work. And then somehow we gotta put some kind of barriers in there. And like I said, all of us, even the chairman, we don't like it, we're walking. There's not enough money in there, Maziska, where we're going. We're leaving, we're walking out the door. So there's a lot riding on this, but we're ready to start. Once we approve the application, they have 270 days, I believe, to approve it. In that time, we're meeting with them.
And if they don't approve it, you guys can move on anyway without their approval. Did you know that?
No, because
good
we won't
point.
have the funding available.
You wouldn't have the funding.
Well, why would I move on without it? Now you're
Because-
hoping, not me. I know what I'm doing.
Well, I know that that was the biggest portion that they wanted to change, that they did change within the act.
Yes. I would
That
never,
was the-
I would
that was
never
the number
brought
one
this
change they
if I
made.
had any other options.
There are other options.
You know, you're right.
There are other options. The Southern Utes, everybody keeps invoking their name, but the Southern Utes, they have their own minerals management office. And they have not compacted, contracted any portion of the BIA.
Yeah.
They hold
They
into
went out to
account,
outside.
they hold into account with their minerals management.
Any well-oiled people in here?
BLM is actually who's operational. They had 2 billion to start with.
They did.
The difference between the
That 2
Southern
billion,
Ute,
I can grow it just like they did.
the difference between the Southern Ute and us is the Southern Ute's on the front end of the decline curve in their production. So these things work, and it worked in the 20s and 30s and 40s with us. Now we're on the back end of the decline curve around the whole county. So that's why the orphan well becomes now an attractive venture. Enhanced oil recovery is going after that third hump. We got to get creative, we got to get motivated in areas that Indian country generally doesn't see. And another problem, BIA doesn't train their folks on a decline curve on the back end like we're at. So we don't have anybody in the BIA that can walk in the door and help us.
They aren't interested in our revenue.
There's no one. We've got to get creative. We think Osages can do it better. But we're at this point now because we're on the back end of the decline curve, and the orphan well is everybody's left. So we went back in and looked at all these things that everybody left, and we're getting more barrels out of there. So we got to get creative. We think this might be the way to go. I really believe Jim hit it hard with innovation. It gives us a home to attack these things without all these approvals. The reason Mr. Red Eagle and I went for the orphan well is that's the only thing they would let us have. They didn't care about that. Don't touch their oil. They're the best in the country in their mind. We couldn't mess with that. But this decline curve on the back end, orphan wells, there's 1,602 of them on 552 leases. They just popped up and they're not closed. They don't want to deal with it, so we grabbed it and we took it. Now we're seeing value. We see we can plug wells. We can go after ones that are still out there, drop the royalties possibly, and go after additional barrels. So we're trying to get creative. We think TERA is a way to do it.
And I'm glad you guys are thinking of that, but all I'm saying is the executive runs a nation, and there's always a struggle for dollars there. There's a struggle for a school, there's a struggle for health. There's always a struggle for dollars there. And if you guys jump off and do this without really knowing that your dollars are there, I see it as a huge disaster for the shareholders. I know there's off-ramps.
If you have not seen my quote in Associated Press, this council will not do that. You are talking something that we have already made public. The dollars aren't sufficiently secured in your nation's treasury. I'm not going for this. My vote's no. It has to be secure.
So what makes you feel, what will
I was with
give
the
you
chief
the
last time in Washington negotiating the MIFA, and I hope to be again.
Well, my
Nothing really happens here.
My
You gotta be in
dollars
that
always
desk
have to be
tomorrow.
supplemented. Tribes don't compact because there's money in it. They compact to make things better for their citizens. That's why they compact. And you have to augment that with tribal dollars, which are stretched pretty
Which
thin.
is a good point, it was a good segue. When you were on council, in this constitution, who all do you fund? What branches when you were there?
We funded all 3 branches.
3 branches?
3 branches of
Who else
government.
is in there?
Well, we have enterprise, we have enterprise.
No, well, let's go be
We have
something.
enterprise board.
Let's go,
We have Article 15, and then
yeah,
council's in
and
there.
then, yeah, we have us in there.
Boards and commissions are in there.
Yes, and
We're
then
not a
also.
board. We're not a commission.
No, you're.
No board or
independent
commission is put in
agency.
office by a vote of the people.
I agree with you, Everett. I think you guys are your own people. I think you guys should have your own oath of office because you have a different constituency than Congress does or the chief does. And I got almost nailed to a cross for saying that publicly.
Well, let me finish
We're
with
gonna
my
wrap
question.
up.
Yeah, I'd like to have, my little time at the mic here. The reason I said that, because we have 3 districts. We have the Minerals Council, that is also in here. We have funded these beautiful buildings, our culture, our arbors, we've got fitness center down here. Getting ready to do a senior citizen center over in Fairfax Housing. That is awesome. How much money, when you were, and I appreciate Congressman Maker, because when we went to ask for $1 million, he voted. Don't give them half, give them what they need. Give them what they need to fight to protect this mineral space. I wanted to publicly say thank you for that vote you had. But everyone else gets something, but the one who owns the biggest asset is the Mineral Council. And we have no funds to do anything. And then COVID hit. Our producers suffered. Our people suffered. Our shareholders. It put everything to a halt. What we're doing is, this is just information that we want to give you, what we've been working on for the past year. This is information. I don't want a decision from you all today. That's not what we're looking for. We want to tell you that that this is an opportunity that we can take. Can we look at other opportunities? You bet. Absolutely. And we will do that and report back to you as well. But this is something that we have an opportunity to do 2 things. Well, several things. First off, increase your check. How do we do that? Right now, I know that, I'm not here to correct my chairman or anything, but I want to say this. Our last report, that what we were getting per day, 7,000 barrels per day. 7,900. We're used to being at 10. And then it's dropping, it's declining. And that decline impacts the checks. Now, luckily, oil's gone up. So we have seen that increase. But if our checks would have probably been over 4,000 had we had those extra 3,000 barrels easily, or even more than that. But here's the deal. We're not looking at, 3 months ago. So we know September, it's going to be better. But what will be even greater is we get more producers. Reduce the time that they have to go after 270 days. I don't know about you, but I don't want to wait 270 days on a paycheck or to get started. That's brutal. That's crazy. But we have people that are still believing this, and they know that there's still opportunity here. So what does a TERA do? It reduces and streamlines the process that we can get leases, and then leases equals production, and production equals increasing your check. That's what we're doing, and I hope I close with that. And
I would like to say we're stopping. I'd like to say that I'd like to let our council, second chair, and Councilman Redcord close, because they're going to handle Bahusco's meeting.
Oh, really?
You've got to give me one day.
Thank you, Chairman. This is what this meeting's all about. There's pros and cons, there's agreements and there's disagreements, and there's criticisms, and you name it. This is what what the gentleman here does is just bring us forward to let you all look at it and see what you think about it. That's all. And I myself, to be honest about it, I'm not sure about it too. I'm not sure about the funding. I'm not sure about the liability. Maria mentioned, so did Tony. That's a big concern about the liability. Some of the council members or other council members that are not here tonight, they're concerned about that liability. What happens if we get off on our own and we don't have BLA standards in minds, and the ranchers come up and say, hey, you guys get out here. We have that federal marshal, that federal authority going out there and say, okay, you can't run all over these Indians. But if they're not there to back us up, who do we have? That's what that federal trust is all about. Is that right, council? And that's what the 1906, it's not the 1906 Act. It's the 1906 law. We all know why they did that. Because war was Henry Ford who changed all that. When the combustible engine was invented, right? And he changed the world like that. And those people that had those oil wells, those leases that leased the whole county, they knew that the war was going to be a factor. Even when I people knew that. He knew that because they used grease on them wheels that the wheelwrights they used to have, right? They used to call it, what do you call it? That name's for it, I can't remember. Anyway, they did what I can do with that. There's pictures of him when he came in there. He brought some of the people from Hominy with him too. And that's why they call it the band, He was a visionary, but he also knew what was going to happen. And he knew that people like brother and I, our children, our grandchildren, we are his great-great-grandchildren. And he knew that someday that we would, and still. But just to correct some of the statements that people are making, I'm sure they're trying to push this thing. I don't blame them either. But 270 days, the last biannual meeting of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they did get it down to a little over 150 days. That's around 3 weeks. That's still a long time, though, right? Still a long time on a permit. It's still over 100 days. We can get a well plugging permit, an emergency well plugging permit within 2 weeks. But they can apply for one and it's done in a matter of weeks. That's a well plugging permit versus permit to plug the well. That's leaking or emitting gas or something like that. So that makes you think about it. That's the first thing I asked people, why are they giving us a emergency plugging permit in 15 days and they can't give us a drilling permit in 100 days, right? That don't make any sense, does it? Well, there's a lot of discrepancies here. There's a lot of disagreements and there's a lot of distrust too. There's things that have been going on in the past, just like some of the people mentioned. Nepotism. That's hiring cousins, or you're hiring your wife, or hiring your children. That still goes on today, don't it? We can't do that, can we? So, there's a lot to think about this, It's like some of the people that mentioned, you put somebody on top of you, not just a supervisor up there. He's going to hire before you know it, he's going to hire his niece or his cousin or something like that. They think that could possibly happen. We have to think about this. That's why we're here to give this to you and let you think about it, and weigh it, take it home, sleep on it, to see what you think about it tomorrow. That's when your decision is going to be really, all this is going to go through. It goes through my mind all the time. We think about this all the time. So I'm really glad to be here. This is my mother's country down here. I always feel like I'm home when I come down here. And talking to cousins, I always tell people I can't go to home. They know who I am. Can't even do anything because they're going to say something. And that's true too. Most of my relatives are down here in the most of them here. I'm not related to anybody, but brother, we're not related. I'm not related to these guys either, But I'm related to these people around here, even by our bands. Margo, others, we can't right out here, brother, completely agree with that. Get that right, brother.
Yeah.
My great grandmother was one night was her niece. That's how we used to call her old grandma. So I hope y'all take this all in and weigh it. My dad used to say you have to weigh everything. Yes, sir. There's pluses and minuses, pluses and minuses. We got a long way to go. We can't let anybody come in and say, okay, you guys better do this. We're not going to let them do that. Or the officials of the tribe, you better do this. We can't listen to them. You got to make your own decision. And Mineral Council is a very powerful entity. It really is. It was involved, all from the very beginning. I always say this too, my grandfather already was 26 years old in 1906. 26, he was a prime of life. And all that was, they were flagging the get long hair and everything. It must have been an amazing time. But there was also a lot of greed, graft, and that's what that was on. I'm glad to see all of it. That's what my take is, and hope you all can make a good decision on what you think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Osage nikashe. Zandoli nikashe. Wele joa le tsea le kistomai nikashe. Awaki nikashe. Akalon. Kistomai tsea. Edoma le tsea. Asoli kalon zanzoli nikashe. Osage nikale, tokta, itatsilo kale, tokta nikashere. Perché ispalo nikashere, kalon mahitanka nikashere kalon, okikere tsere, Osage nikashere wahlele shikshe wahlele la, tokta nikashere wahlele la she. Apatse kalo kitua nikashere vanira nikse. The koan se ahati kistomai peedon pa kalon. Last one, he left us. It was a hard time for us. He did a good job. Yeah. There's a lot of spirit in his walk. In his mind. Everett had to step in and take over. It was a sad time. But we're going to try to make it beyond that time. So I just want to thank our Zonzoli people, expressing their heart and their soul on how we need to handle this, and maybe not even handle it, just as our old people say, just put it down and let it go on and do something else. We'll try to make that decision, but we're asking for your prayers that you help us. And if we're doing something wrong, tell us. And we enjoy that. Your sister over here, you've got big concern, and I hear you. But we're trying to take that back, and we're trying to discuss it among ourselves. We need to leave this thing on the table, tell the United States, you treat us like equals. We are war allies. They came to us when you wanted to expand this land. You wanted to help protect their new Louisiana purchase that came to the Osage people. And these Zonzoli people carried that horn, that flag into battle to protect all this. And these are United States people. They don't know these things. They've forgotten. But we still remember. We thank our people around here. You guys ask us to come dance. You guys ask us to do these things. We're humble and we're excited. And we said too much or whatever. We just forgive us. But we thank you for allowing us to come to the hall and present these things.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Grab a sandwich, grab something, take it home with you. You being here